You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans! Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and there's a lot to get to today with some head coaching news both in the NFL and the NHL. The Lending Tree Bowl happened yesterday, along with a couple of baseball signings and a couple college basketball games that I want to preview. But I will start with the big NFL head coaching news: the Panthers hiring Matt Rule. Now, I have to give the Panthers credit for landing the big fish. Matt Rule was the sexy candidate. He was the guy that a lot of teams were after, including the Giants. I promise I'll get into that. But David Tepper blew him away with a ridiculous offer. And it really is ridiculous. On no planet is this guy worth $60 million over 7 years. I mean, that's just ridiculous. There's no other word for it. And it kind of plays into this notion about him. He's being massively overrated. This guy has accomplished nothing in the NFL. Look, I understand what he did at Baylor, and it is impressive. No question about that. But this guy is being made out to be the second coming of Belichick. He's not. He's just not. This guy is being incredibly overrated right out of the gate. I'll tell you what, for this contract, I don't think it's a bad thing that the Giants didn't get him. I promise I'll get into it more, but I don't blame the Giants for not matching this. This is ridiculous. Look, I give David Tepper credit for landing the big fish. I do. If you're a Panthers fan, you have to be happy about this hire. And I think Rule will do really well in Carolina. He's got a couple really exciting pieces there in McCaffrey and Moore. He's going to have a new quarterback, probably Justin Herbert. I think Rule will work out in Carolina. But this guy has accomplished nothing yet. And he's already one of the highest paid coaches in football. I mean, this happens every year. The hot college guy comes in, he gets offered an SH load of money, and it's a mixed bag as to how he does. The last one to really work out great is Pete Carroll. But Kingsbury finished last in the NFC West. Bobby Petrino failed. Nick Saban failed. Lou Holtz failed. Steve Spurrier failed. This is incredibly risky. And to the people out there saying that he's going to turn the Panthers around overnight, no! It's still the same team. They only have 3 building blocks: Christian McCaffrey, DJ Moore, and Brian Burns. That's it. They still need a quarterback. Again, I think they're getting Herbert, and I think that'll be a very good fit. I like the idea of him and Rule together, but it's going to take time for all of those pieces to coalesce. And there's still 49 other spots on that roster that need to be filled. This was a bad Panthers team last year. He's not going to turn them around overnight. Again, I like the hire. You cannot begrudge this hire. I am only begrudging the contract and the fact that this now makes him the most overrated head coach in football. Moving over to the Giants now, and I'll start with how Rule going to the Panthers affects them. It kills them. They have lost this head coaching cycle. This was their guy. This was the guy that the Giants wanted from the outset, and they couldn't get him. That's a terrible look for a franchise, especially a franchise that was once the class of the NFL. It's amazing how far they've fallen. It really is. If you're a Giants fan, don't get upset at Matt Rule. He did what was right by him and his family. He took the most money and the most power. He wouldn't have gotten that with the Giants. That's all well and good. That's fine. I don't think he's earned that. But this was a report that I saw, I don't know if it's true, that the Giants wanted Rule to fly to New Jersey. They wouldn't fly to Texas for him. If that's true, shame on the Giants. This was their guy. This is the guy who all the members of the media said that they wanted. And I'm not doubting those reports. I believe them wholeheartedly. But to not go full court press on him? There's no excuse for that. Fly out to Texas. Stay in a hotel near his house. Do whatever you need to do to get this man to the Giants. If this was the guy that they wanted, they had to make it happen. It's irrelevant whether he was the right choice. All that matters is that Gettleman wanted him. And the owners too. Although not at the contract he got from Tepper. Which again, I think is the right decision. He hasn't earned that contract. Massively overrated. There's no question. But if this was the guy that you wanted, you need to make it happen. And the Giants didn't. And instead they pivoted to Joe Judge. Look, I have no idea how Joe Judge is going to do as a head coach. There are a bunch of reasons to be skeptical about this hire. He's a really under-the-radar guy. He is a guy who has gotten some head coaching interviews, not a lot. He's supposedly a very good special teams coordinator. There's a school of thought that says the special teams coordinators can't be good NFL head coaches. I disagree with that wholeheartedly. All you have to do is look at John Harbaugh. I don't want to hear about Bill Belichick giving him a recommendation. The Bill Belichick coaching tree is terrible. It's probably the worst in the NFL. All of his disciples have failed. What makes you think that Joe Judge is going to change that? I'll tell you, I think he's going to be one and done here at New York. I think the Giants are going to have another bad year. They're going to fire Gettleman, and the new GM is going to fire Judge. This actually plays into a previous point that I made about the Giants keeping Gettleman. Do you really want him deciding who the next head coach of the Giants is going to be? Well, with this hire, it doesn't matter. This guy is so under the radar that if he gets fired after 1 year, it's not going to raise any eyebrows. It's not like they hired Matt Rule. It's not like they hired a Stexy candidate. They hired a no-name. And no one will be upset if he is one and done. And there's one final point I want to make about Joe Judge. I don't believe that Joe Judge was really their second choice. I think he's their third choice. The Giants panicked here. This is a panic hire. They saw their number one guy in Rule go to Carolina. So they immediately went to number 2 on the list, and that was Joe Judge. But they knew that Jason Garrett would have impressed them more. I think the Giants really wanted Jason Garrett when Rule spurned them. But they heard everyone criticizing Garrett, so they panicked. They hired Judge, and now Garrett, according to Ed Werder, who was right about Garrett leaving the Cowboys, is supposedly the Giants' top option to be offensive coordinator. Think about that for a second. The Giants' top 2 guys, Rule and Garrett, are not their head coach. Look, it's okay to be second best. Adam Gase was the Jets' second choice to Matt Rule. You all know I like Gase. Frank Reich was the Colts' second choice to Josh McDaniels. Reich has worked out more than McDaniels ever would have. But the Giants panicked here. They saw the reaction from their fan base. They didn't want to replace Matt Rule with Jason Garrett, who would have been an unpopular hire. But they really wanted him. So they made him offensive coordinator and brought in their third choice as head coach. And anyone who tells you that that's not what happened needs to wake up and smell the coffee. The Giants were so concerned about optics here that they now have their third choice as their head coach. Just go with Garrett. He's better than Judge. I guarantee you that Joe Judge will not be as good a coach as Jason Garrett was for the Cowboys. But let's assume for a minute that the Giants' offense has a good year. Daniel Jones takes a massive step forward. Barkley plays great. Slayton takes another step forward. And the Giants' offense is clicking on all cylinders. Jason Garrett is going to be off the team. He'll be snatched up in a minute. This is a no-win situation for the Giants. Just hire Garrett. It's clear that's who you really wanted after Rule. The only reason why you didn't hire him was because you were concerned about the optics of losing out on Matt Rule and replacing him with an unpopular guy. Be true to yourself and hire the guy that you think is best fit for your team. It's incredible how much they mangled this search. Look, if Jason Garrett doesn't join the Giants, then Judge really was their second choice. And that's fine. Okay, that makes sense. That projects stability. But what doesn't project stability is hiring Garrett as offensive coordinator along with Joe Judge. Because it just proves that Garrett was the guy that you wanted. You were just afraid of the backlash. Don't be afraid of the backlash. Do what you think is right. There were a lot of people that were killing Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones has shut a lot of people up. Who cares if you make unpopular decisions? It's the GM's job to make the decisions that he thinks is best for the franchise and not listen to the fans. If it was up to the fans, they wouldn't have Daniel Jones. I got news for you. There were a lot of Giants fans out there that are thanking God that Daniel Jones was taken at 6. The pick was killed at the time. Gettleman was true to what he believed in then, and he's not now. The hypocrisy with this man is real. He couldn't decide on a vision for this team before. Now it seems like he's picked a direction. I used to be okay with Gettleman. Now after this, I'm not so sure. He better have a fantastic offseason. The other head coaching news today is the Nashville Predators replacing the fired Peter Laviolette, who was fired last night, with John Hines. Look, I like David Poile a lot. I think he's one of the best GMs, not just in hockey, but in sports. And his team is having a bad year. Alright. You know what? That happens. But on what planet is the solution firing a Stanley Cup winning head coach? Look, I like Laviolette a lot. He's the first Islanders head coach that I remember, and I've always liked him, even after he left the Islanders. And you take a look at what he's done with the Predators. He's never missed the playoffs. Yeah, they're having a bad year. You know why? Their roster stinks. There are only 2 keepers currently on their roster. Roman Josi and Dante Fabro. Everyone else is expendable. Their biggest issue is at goalie. It's not Laviolette's fault that Pekka Rinne is old and UC Saros isn't a starter. He's a good backup. He's not a starter. David Poile's roster construction here failed. And that's okay. You learn from it, you rebuild, and you make the team better for the future. Instead, you have made them exponentially worse by replacing a great head coach with a terrible one. What has John Hines done to tell you that he's the right coach for the Predators? The Devils were making a playoff push, bringing in Subban, they had Hischier, they had Hall. Instead, they fell flat. And Hines was canned. Now, granted, he has a better roster in Nashville, but if you think he's going to be better than Laviolette, you're dreaming. This guy isn't going to lead you to 5 straight playoff seasons, including a Stanley Cup Finals. I guarantee you that before the next NHL season starts, Laviolette will be behind another NHL team's bench. In fact, if I was the Sharks, I'd hire him now. I wouldn't even wait. Moving over to the Lending Tree Bowl now, and the University of Louisiana at Lafayette beating Miami of Ohio, which I was right about. I was wrong about it being a romp, though. Miami of Ohio played the Raging Cajuns tough. Brett Gabbert, Blaine's brother, had a good game. He didn't have a great game. He had a good game. He was safe with the football. Tyre Shelton played really well. Jalen Bester had 2 touchdowns. And Jack Sorensen had a great game. I think Sorensen has a future in the NFL. But ultimately, they just weren't as good as the Raging Cajuns. Levi Lewis is one of the best dual-threat quarterbacks in the nation. And him, combined with Elijah Mitchell, killed the Red Hawks on the ground. And going to his passing, I loved how Lewis got a bunch of his receivers involved in big ways. Jamarcus Bradley caught 2 touchdowns. Caleb Gossett had 2 big catches. Jalen Williams had 3 big catches. And Jamal Bell had 2 big catches. The Raging Cajuns were just the better team yesterday. And there's no shame in losing to a better team, if you're the Red Hawks here. The 2 baseball signings that I want to talk about involve relievers, and I'll start with the Nationals bringing back Daniel Hudson. I think it's a great move for him. He was lights out for him last year. He was great in the playoffs last year, except in the World Series. I grant you that. But you know what? He was lights out everywhere else. He's been a really good pitcher in this league for a long time. It's $5.5 million a year. I think it's a really, really good move for the Nationals. A team that, while they won't repeat as World Series champions, they don't have Rendon anymore. It's going to be a much bigger loss than Harper was, because they don't have a capable replacement for him. They're gonna make some noise this year. It's very possible that they can make the playoffs again. Very, very possible. The other move that I want to talk about is Steve Cishek moving over from the Cubs to the White Sox. I like Cishek a lot. He's been really consistent in this league for a long time. Was good with the Marlins, Cardinals, Mariners, Rays, and Cubs. Now going over to the White Sox, a team that's making a legitimate playoff push. There is no reason that they can't win the AL Central. The Twins are going to regress. Now look, their biggest issue is pitching, but they have their young guns set up in their starting rotation. All they needed was bullpen help. And Cishek is that. I think he's going to be a really, really good fit for the White Sox. I do want to talk about a couple college basketball games, though, and those are the two games that feature two ranked teams tonight. OSU versus Maryland and Baylor versus Texas Tech. I'll start with the former, and I'm really not a fan of OSU this year. They're very one-dimensional. When Caleb Wesson is off, the Buckeyes have no chance. Now, it's very rare that he's off. I think he's going to be a good player in the NBA, but other than him, they don't have a scoring option. Dwayne Washington Jr. is not that. Nor is DJ Carton or Kyle Young. The Buckeyes scare me this year, and they especially scare me against a well-rounded Maryland team. Look, Mark Turgeon is one of the better head coaches in the nation. I don't think he gets the national credit that he should. And this team that he's put together this year, with Anthony Cowan, Jalen Smith, Aaron Wiggins, no relation to Andrew, and Eric Ayala, I think they're too well balanced for the Buckeyes. I think they're going to have trouble slowing down all four of them. It's in Maryland, so for those reasons, I'm picking the Terrapins. Moving over to Texas now, and Baylor is a really, really good team this year. They're a team that I don't think is getting enough national attention. Scott Drew is one of the best head coaches in the nation, and his father is a really nice guy. I've met Homer, talked to him, really nice guy, took a picture with him. And when you look at their play on the court, Jared Butler and Masio Teague are as good a dynamic duo as you're going to find in the nation. Butler has the outside shooting, and Teague has the inside shooting. He's a really good penetrator. But I absolutely love Texas Tech this year. Chris Beard did a fantastic job with them last year, took them to the finals, made that game a lot more interesting than I thought he would. I understand that it's a different team, but you know what? It's a more exciting team. It's a more well-rounded team. Jameis Ramsey, David Moretti, Terrence Shannon Jr., Kyler Edwards, and TJ Holyfield. That's probably the best starting five in the nation. I'm picking Texas Tech here. They're home. And I think they're going to be at least an Elite Eight team. Tomorrow, I'll be recapping those games, along with breaking down any sports news that hits the wire. The Cleveland Browns still need a head coach, although I do think that's going to take a while. Until tomorrow, I am Jacob Valk, saying that every time I sign something, I thank my lucky stars that I wasn't born a Kovaleski, a Wamsgans, or a Peckinpah.